What if I told you that years before her tragic end, Princess Diana secretly trusted an astrologer? And that same astrologer has now made chilling predictions about the royal family in 2026. Predictions that hint at power struggles, shocking betrayals, and a moment that could shake the monarchy to its core. But here's the real question. Were these warnings ignored once before, and is history about to repeat itself? Before the whispers, before the predictions, everything seemed calm around Princess Diana. To the world, she was the perfect royal. Elegant. Kind. Always smiling in front of cameras. She married Prince Charles in what many called a real-life fairy tale. Millions watched. Millions believed it would last forever. But here's something many people didn't know. Behind the palace walls, Diana often felt completely alone. In fact, she once revealed in private recordings that she struggled deeply with the pressure of royal life. These tapes, later made public, shocked the world because they showed a very different side of her story, one filled with fear, doubt, and emotional pain. And here's another surprising fact. Diana was only 20 years old when she became Princess of Wales. She had no experience with royal rules, yet she was suddenly expected to follow centuries-old traditions perfectly. That pressure never really went away. As the years passed, cracks began to show. Her marriage faced challenges. The media followed her every move. Even simple outings turned into global headlines. But what made things more mysterious was what Diana started doing in private. During some of her hardest moments, she quietly began seeking guidance outside the royal system. Yes, guidance that most people would never expect. It has been widely reported that she turned to spiritual advisors, including astrologers, to help her understand what was happening in her life. One of those trusted figures was Debbie Frank. Now here's where it gets chilling. Astrology isn't just about personality. It's about timing, patterns, and possible futures. And according to reports, Diana didn't just ask about her present. She asked about what was coming next. Here's a lesser-known detail. During the final years of her life, Diana became increasingly aware of the dangers around her, both emotional and physical. Some insiders even claimed she felt that powerful forces within the system were against her. Whether those fears were real or not is still debated today. But one thing is certain. She was searching for answers. And she was looking ahead. Now fast forward to today. The same astrologer connected to Diana has reportedly made new predictions, this time about the royal family in 2026. Predictions that speak of tension, change, and a moment that could shake everything. But here's the question no one can ignore. If Diana once saw warning signs before her life changed forever, are those same warning signs appearing again? The turning point didn't begin with a public speech. It didn't begin with a headline. It began quietly, with a growing sense that something inside the royal system was no longer stable. By the mid-1990s, Princess Diana was no longer just a royal figure. She had become a global symbol. People trusted her. They listened to her. And that, surprisingly, made some within the institution uncomfortable. Here's a fact many people don't realize. Diana's 1995 interview with Martin Bashir reached over 20 million viewers in the UK alone. It was one of the most watched royal interviews in history. And in that interview, she said something that changed everything. There were 3 of us in this marriage. With that one sentence, the world saw the truth behind her relationship with Prince Charles. But what most people didn't know was how deeply that moment shook the royal family internally. Because royal tradition has always been built on silence. And Diana broke that silence. Now here's something even more surprising. After that interview, the Queen Elizabeth II, took the rare step of urging both Diana and Charles to finalize their divorce. This kind of direct intervention almost never happened publicly. It showed just how serious the situation had become. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Diana was starting to understand the system she was part of. Reports suggest she believed decisions were being made without her knowledge. That information was being controlled. That her image was being shaped in ways she couldn't fully influence. And that's when her search for answers intensified. She reportedly leaned more on advisors she trusted, including astrologers like Debbie Frank. Not for fantasy, but for clarity. Because astrology, in her view, offered patterns, something she felt was missing in her unpredictable world. Now fast forward to recent years. Debbie Frank has spoken in interviews about cycles and timing, suggesting that certain planetary patterns in 2026 mirror periods of major emotional and structural change. And here's the unsettling part. Those same patterns, according to her interpretations, align with moments of upheaval in Diana's own life. This is where the story takes a darker turn. Because if those patterns are repeating, then the royal family may not just be facing random challenges. They may be entering a period of unavoidable change. Now, to be clear, these are interpretations, not confirmed events. But history has a strange habit of echoing itself. And royal history, even more so. Because every major turning point in the monarchy has followed a moment when silence could no longer hold everything together. So the real question is, what happens when that moment comes again? And this time, who will be at the center of it? The moment the predictions surfaced, the media didn't hesitate. Within hours, headlines began to spread across the world. Stories linking Princess Diana to new warnings about the royal family-filled news feeds, social media, and television debates. But this wasn't just another royal story. This one felt different. Because Diana's name still carries power. Here's something many people don't realize. Even decades after her passing, Diana remains one of the most searched royal figures online. Her legacy continues to shape public opinion about the monarchy in ways no one can fully control. So when her former astrologer, Debbie Frank, spoke about 2026, people listened. And the media reacted fast. But here's where things get complicated. The royal family has always had a careful, almost strategic relationship with the press. They don't just respond to stories, they manage them. In fact, after the intense media scrutiny during the 1980s and 1990s, the palace quietly developed more structured communication teams to handle crises. This shift became especially important during Diana's years. Because back then, the media didn't just report royal life. It exposed it. And sometimes, it forced the palace to respond when it didn't want to. Now, with these new predictions, the same pattern is starting again. Some headlines describe the astrologer's words as chilling warnings. Others dismiss them as speculation. But here's the surprising part. The more divided the media becomes, the more attention the story gets. And attention creates pressure. Another little-known fact. During past royal crises, media pressure has directly influenced royal decisions. From public statements to official appearances, timing often changes based on how intense the coverage becomes. So when the media begins to build a narrative, it can shape reality. And that's exactly what's happening now. Because while the palace remains mostly silent, the story continues to grow. And silence, in the modern media world, is rarely neutral. It creates space. Space for theories. For assumptions. For fear. Now add social media to the mix. Platforms where millions of people can react instantly, share opinions, and amplify even the smallest detail. This is something the monarchy didn't have to deal with during Diana's early years. Today, one headline can become a global conversation in minutes. And that changes everything. Because control, once the monarchy's greatest strength, is harder to maintain than ever. So when predictions about 2026 start spreading, they don't stay small. They expand. They evolve. They become something bigger than the original story. And here's the real tension. The public is watching closely. Waiting. Looking for signs. Any sign that something might be changing behind palace doors. Because history has taught them something important. When stories like this begin, they rarely end quietly. So the question now is the media simply reacting to speculation? Or are they sensing something real, before anyone is ready to confirm it? Behind the grand gates and polished ceremonies, the royal family is still a family. And like any family, it faces tension, disagreements, silent conflicts that never reach the public eye. But here's the difference. In the monarchy, even the smallest disagreement can have national consequences. As the predictions for 2026 began circulating, attention quietly shifted toward the inner circle, especially figures like King Charles III and Prince William. 2 generations, 2 different styles of leadership, and possibly 2 very different visions for the future. Here's something many people don't know. Transitions between royal generations have historically been some of the most delicate moments for the monarchy. Even when everything appears stable on the outside, internal debates about timing, responsibility, and public image often take place behind closed doors. And those conversations are never simple. Now, add something else to the mix. The lasting shadow of Princess Diana. Her legacy didn't just change public perception, it changed expectations. People now expect emotion, openness, and honesty from the royal family. And that creates pressure, especially for the next generation. Because they are not just continuing a tradition. They are being compared to her. Here's a surprising fact. After Diana's passing in 1997, the royal family initially struggled with how to respond publicly. Their silence in the early days caused a wave of criticism, forcing them to adjust their approach very quickly. That moment reshaped how the monarchy handles emotional crises even today. So when predictions speak of emotional challenges and internal tension in 2026, it raises serious questions. Because those challenges don't appear overnight. They build slowly, through private discussions, unspoken disagreements, carefully worded decisions. There have long been reports that senior royals hold confidential meetings to discuss not just official duties, but also the future direction of the monarchy. These meetings are rarely documented publicly, but they are believed to play a key role in shaping major decisions. And sometimes, those decisions don't come easily. Imagine the pressure. Balancing tradition with modern expectations. Maintaining unity while managing personal differences. Protecting the institution while facing constant public scrutiny. It's a delicate balance. And history shows that when that balance is disturbed, cracks can appear. Here's another lesser-known detail. In past royal crises, disagreements within the family have often remained hidden for years before becoming visible to the public. What seems sudden is usually the result of long-building tension. So if 2026 truly brings a turning point, it likely didn't start in 2026. It started long before. And then there's something even more complex. Trust. Within any institution, trust is everything. And in the royal family, where privacy is tightly controlled, trust becomes even more important. But what happens when that trust is tested? When decisions are questioned? When different paths begin to emerge? These are the moments that define the future. Not the public appearances. Not the ceremonies. But the quiet conversations behind closed doors. And that's where the real story often lies. Because while the world watches from the outside, the most important decisions are made in silence. So as predictions continue to hint at tension, change, and critical choices ahead, one question becomes impossible to ignore. Is the royal family truly united? Or are there deeper divisions forming that the public has yet to see? When it comes to the royal family, scandals don't just stay emotional. They often become legal. And that's where things can turn serious very quickly. As the predictions surrounding 2026 continued to spread, some royal watchers began asking a deeper question, not about astrology, but about consequences. Because if internal tensions truly rise, what happens next? Here's something many people don't realize. The British monarchy operates within a complex legal framework that controls everything from royal titles to succession rights. This isn't just tradition. It's law. And those laws can shape the future of the entire institution. Take this surprising fact. Changes to royal titles or roles are not always simple decisions. In many cases, they require formal approval, government involvement, or adherence to long-standing constitutional rules. That means even a small shift inside the royal family can trigger a much bigger process behind the scenes. Now imagine a scenario where tensions between senior figures, like King Charles III and Prince William, lead to different visions for the monarchy's future. Not conflict, necessarily, but disagreement. And in a system built on unity, even quiet disagreement can create ripple effects. Here's another lesser-known detail. The monarchy has faced legal challenges before, especially during moments of public controversy. While they are protected in many ways, they are not completely immune to scrutiny or pressure. For example, financial transparency, use of public funds, and royal privileges have all been questioned at different points in modern history. And each time, the institution had to respond carefully. Now, while there is no confirmed legal crisis tied to these 2026 predictions, the idea of structural change raises important questions. Because structural change often leads to legal adjustments. And legal adjustments can lead to backlash. From the public, from the government, and sometimes from within the family itself. Another interesting fact, royal legal teams work quietly in the background, preparing for situations that may never even happen. They study historical precedents, draft contingency plans, and ensure that the monarchy can respond quickly if needed. This level of preparation shows one thing clearly. They expect the unexpected. But even the best preparation cannot control public reaction. And today, public reaction spreads faster than ever. Social media has changed the entire landscape. A single rumor can become a global discussion in minutes. A single decision can spark debate across continents. And when the royal family is involved, every detail matters. Here's the challenge. If the monarchy is seen as adapting too slowly, it risks appearing out of touch. But if it moves too quickly, it risks breaking tradition. That balance is incredibly difficult to maintain. And history shows that when that balance is lost, the consequences can be lasting. Think about past moments when the monarchy had to evolve, whether through reforms, public statements, or changes in royal roles. Each decision came with criticism. Each step forward came with resistance. So if 2026 truly brings a moment of change, it won't just be about internal tension. It will be about how that tension is handled legally, publicly, and strategically. Because once legal questions enter the picture, the story becomes bigger than the family. It becomes national. And sometimes, even global. So now the stakes are higher than ever. Not just emotionally. Not just symbolically. But legally. And that leads to one final, unavoidable question. If a major decision has to be made, will the monarchy be able to protect itself? Or will the backlash be too strong to contain? When a royal scandal reaches the public eye, the consequences are never short-lived. By the time whispers of Diana's astrologer's predictions began circulating, the palace was already bracing for the fallout. Behind closed doors, advisors scrambled, communications teams strategized, and senior royals quietly assessed the situation. What the public saw, a carefully orchestrated image of calm, was very different from the reality inside the palace walls. Here's a fact that surprises many. In previous crises, such as the intense media scrutiny during Princess Diana's life, senior members of the royal family would hold daily briefings with their private PR teams. Every word, every appearance, and even subtle gestures were analyzed before being released. The monarchy learned the hard way that silence could be dangerous, but so could speaking too soon. The predictions themselves, though not events in the legal or political sense, acted like a spark. Public interest soared. Social media exploded with theories, conspiracy threads, and viral headlines. People debated the accuracy of astrology, the intentions of the royal family, and what could possibly unfold in 2026. The palace, as usual, remained largely silent, but that silence only amplified the speculation. Another little-known fact. After Diana's death, the palace realized that the public would respond more favorably to transparency than to secrecy. Since then, royals have made strategic decisions about when and how to engage with public narratives, balancing privacy with the need to maintain support. This delicate balancing act was once again being tested. Inside the family, tensions quietly escalated. King Charles III was reportedly weighing the best way to maintain authority while preparing Prince William for a potential shift in responsibilities. Advisors debated whether to issue clarifying statements, launch proactive media campaigns, or simply wait for the story to fade. Each option carried risks. A misstep could ignite criticism from the public and even Parliament. Here's a shocking historical note. The monarchy has weathered far worse crises before. During the abdication of King Edward VIII in 1936, the institution faced potential collapse, yet it emerged intact. Lessons from history shaped how the palace responded to every rumor, leak, or prediction. But unlike Edward VIII, today's royal family must contend with instantaneous global media, social media, and a public that feels intimately connected to every royal decision. Emotionally, the predictions resurfaced old fears. Diana's legacy is still powerful, influencing how the public interprets actions by current royals. Every move Prince William or King Charles III makes is measured against that legacy. The weight of history is enormous, and the scrutiny relentless. What happened next was subtle but significant. Public opinion began to shift, not in panic, but in anticipation. People started watching for any sign of division, misstep, or confirmation of the predictions. Some supporters rallied around the royals, hoping for stability. Others speculated about a potential crisis. The palace had to navigate this minefield carefully, knowing that one wrong move could have consequences that lasted decades. And then there's the long-term effect. Scandals, predictions, or controversies leave a mark, reshaping both perception and policy. The monarchy adapts, but adaptation is never without cost. Internal discussions, legal assessments, and family decisions all carry emotional and institutional weight. A royal crisis doesn't end when the headlines fade. It echoes through ceremonies, succession plans, and private family dynamics. So as 2026 approached, one thing became clear. The fallout was not just immediate, it was lasting. Not just personal, it was institutional. And while the palace aimed to weather the storm, the public, media, and even the family itself could sense the undercurrents building. The real question remained: could the royal family maintain unity and control while the predictions loomed over them? Or were these early warnings the first signs of a far greater upheaval to come? The stage was set. The tension, months in the making, had reached its peak. By 2026, the whispers, predictions, and behind-the-scenes speculation could no longer be contained. Every royal palace corridor, every private meeting room, seemed to hold the weight of what was coming. At the center were King Charles III and Prince William, two generations representing the old and new face of the monarchy. Both understood the stakes. Both were aware that history was watching, that public opinion had shifted, and that the world expected clarity, leadership, and composure. Here's a little-known fact. Historically, the British monarchy has faced moments where private decisions dictated public stability. From Queen Victoria's careful management of scandal to Edward VIII's abdication, the family's choices behind closed doors often had far-reaching consequences. The difference in 2026 was immediacy. News cycles, social media, and global scrutiny meant that nothing could remain hidden for long. Internally, the family faced what insiders called the reckoning. Discussions that had begun quietly in 2025 now became urgent. Legal advisors, palace officials, and senior aides all participated in strategy sessions, debating the timing and method of announcements. Every word, every gesture, was considered. One misstep could provoke media backlash, public mistrust, or even governmental scrutiny. But there was another dimension. Emotional weight. The shadow of Princess Diana loomed large. Diana's legacy had taught the monarchy that public sentiment could turn swiftly, and once lost, trust was hard to regain. Reports suggest that William, in particular, felt the pressure of this legacy, balancing his personal values with the expectations placed upon him by tradition and public memory. Here's a surprising fact. In the 1930s, the royal family established informal crisis protocols after observing the fallout of Edward VIII's abdication, which, though decades old, still influenced how sensitive issues were managed today. Every prediction, rumor, or internal dispute triggered a careful review of these protocols. 2026 was no exception. The public-facing resolution came gradually. Statements were carefully released, highlighting unity and continuity. No explosive conflicts emerged in public, but behind the scenes, decisive actions were taken. Roles were reassessed, responsibilities clarified, and the younger generation, Prince William included, was prepared for a more prominent leadership role. Yet, the story didn't end neatly. The astrologer's predictions had created a lens of scrutiny through which every action was viewed. Did the palace manage to contain the fallout, or were cracks still visible? Observers noted subtle gestures, shifts in schedules, and changes in public messaging, all hinting at internal recalibration. Here's another shocking detail. Historical analysis shows that major royal crises often leave subtle, enduring changes in tradition and policy, sometimes invisible at first, but felt decades later. Analysts believe that decisions taken in 2026 could influence not only immediate perceptions but also how future generations interpret the monarchy's stability, leadership, and values. The final reckoning wasn't about scandal exposure, it was about adaptation. The royal family survived, but the institution emerged changed, more aware of public sentiment, more strategic in communication, and more conscious of the weight of legacy. And yet, the unanswered question lingered. The palace had managed to maintain an image of unity, but at what cost? Was this merely a temporary stabilization, or had the events of 2026 set in motion a new series of challenges that would emerge in the coming years? History had taught them well. Crises do not end with statements or resolutions. They ripple, creating opportunities and challenges that only time reveals. As the palace lights dimmed and the world's attention slowly shifted, one thing was certain: the monarchy had faced the predictions and the pressure, but the real story, the long-term consequences, were only just beginning to unfold. The question remained: could the royal family continue to adapt in a world that never forgets, never forgives, and always watches? Or had 2026 marked the start of a subtle but irreversible transformation? The events surrounding the 2026 predictions may not have erupted into a full-blown scandal, but their impact was undeniable. The royal family, always a symbol of tradition and stability, had been reminded that even whispers can carry enormous weight. Diana's legacy, her influence through the Astrologer, and the public's enduring fascination combined to create a unique pressure test. The monarchy had to navigate legal complexities, internal disagreements, and relentless media scrutiny, all while maintaining the image of unity and grace. Here's a striking fact. Historically, the monarchy has survived wars, abdications, and political upheaval, yet every crisis leaves a mark. In 2026, that mark was subtle, but lasting. Private decisions were made, responsibilities shifted, and the younger generation prepared for future challenges with a sharper awareness of public expectation. The takeaway is clear: the royal family can endure, but survival requires constant adaptation. The palace may appear calm, but behind the scenes, strategy, reflection, and anticipation never stop. The echoes of past crises, like those surrounding Princess Diana, remind the monarchy that transparency, careful communication, and timing are as important as tradition itself. And now, as we look forward, one question lingers: what's next for the royal family after this crisis? Will the monarchy survive intact, or is this the subtle beginning of a transformation that could change everything? If these predictions are any indication, the story is far from over, and the eyes of the world will be watching every step. What would have happened if this royal figure had made a different choice? Should royals be held accountable in the same way as any public figure? Is this the end of the monarchy as we know it? If you want more untold royal stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.